The mountain cabin looked nothing like the photos on the rental website. Zara pulled her car up the winding dirt road, her headlights cutting through the late evening darkness as snow began to fall more heavily. She had booked this remote getaway in Colorado for a much-needed break from her graphic design work in Denver. 3 days of solitude, mountain air, and creative inspiration. That was the plan. The cabin sat nestled between towering pine trees, their branches heavy with fresh snow. It was larger than she expected, a 2-story log structure with wraparound porches and dark windows that seemed to watch her approach. Zara grabbed her weekend bag and portfolio case from the back seat, eager to get inside before the weather turned worse. The lockbox was exactly where the owner had described, hidden beneath the front porch steps. Inside, she found an old brass key that felt cold and heavy in her palm. The front door opened with a loud creak that echoed through the silent forest. Zara fumbled for the light switch, and warm yellow light flooded the main room. The interior was rustic but comfortable, with exposed wooden beams, a stone fireplace, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a hunting lodge. Everything was clean and well maintained, though there was something unsettling about the silence. No hum of electricity, no distant traffic sounds, just the whisper of wind through the trees outside. Zara set down her bags and walked through the main floor, familiarizing herself with the layout. The kitchen was fully stocked, the living room cozy with thick rugs and heavy curtains. She climbed the narrow staircase to check out the bedrooms upstairs. The master bedroom overlooked the forest with a large window that would offer beautiful mountain views in daylight. As she unpacked her things, Zara noticed something odd. On the nightstand was a guest book, its leather cover worn and aged. She flipped through the pages, reading comments from previous visitors. Most were positive, praising the peaceful location and beautiful scenery. But as she read further back, the entries became stranger. Several guests mentioned unusual sounds and feeling watched. One entry, dated just 2 months ago, simply read, "Left early. Couldn't stay another night. They know we're here." Zara closed the guest book with trembling fingers, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in her chest. She told herself it was just previous guests trying to be dramatic, perhaps bored city dwellers looking for excitement in their mundane vacation stories. But the handwriting in that last entry looked rushed, almost frantic, as if whoever wrote it had been in genuine fear. The wind outside picked up, through the pine trees and rattling the windows. Zara decided to start a fire in the stone fireplace to warm the main room and create a more welcoming atmosphere. She found kindling and logs neatly stacked beside the hearth, along with matches in an old metal tin. Soon, orange flames were dancing in the fireplace, casting flickering shadows across the log walls. She made herself a simple dinner from the supplies she'd brought: pasta with jarred sauce and a glass of wine she'd packed for the occasion. As she ate at the rustic dining table, Zara tried to focus on the peaceful crackling of the fire and the beautiful solitude she'd been craving. This was exactly what she needed after months of demanding clients and impossible deadlines. But as the evening wore on, strange sounds began to emerge from somewhere in the cabin. At first, she attributed them to the old wooden structure settling in the cold. Then she heard what sounded like footsteps on the front porch. Slow, deliberate steps that circled around the cabin's perimeter. Zara froze, her fork halfway to her mouth, straining to listen. The footsteps stopped directly outside the main window. Through the gap in the heavy curtains, she could see a shadow moving past the glass. Her heart began to race as she realized someone was definitely out there, walking around her cabin in the middle of a snowstorm. Who would be wandering around this remote area at night, and why were they circling her temporary home like a predator stalking its prey? Zara quietly stood up from the table and moved toward the window, careful not to make any noise. She peered through the curtain, but the darkness outside was impenetrable. The footsteps had moved to the back of the cabin now, and she could hear them crunching through the snow beneath the kitchen window. Zara's phone had no signal. She'd checked it 3 times now, holding it up toward the windows, moving to different rooms, but the screen showed nothing but no service in the upper left corner. The isolation that had seemed so appealing when she booked this place now felt like a trap. Whoever was outside knew she was alone, vulnerable, with no way to call for help. The footsteps had stopped, but that somehow made everything worse. At least when she could hear movement, she knew where the intruder was. Now they could be anywhere, at any window, any door, watching her every move from the darkness outside. Zara grabbed a kitchen knife from the wooden block on the counter, its weight providing minimal comfort in her shaking hands. She decided to check all the locks. The front door was secure, deadbolt engaged. The back door in the kitchen was also locked tight, but as she moved through the cabin, checking each window latch, she discovered something that made her blood run cold. The basement door, which she hadn't noticed before, was slightly ajar. Cool air was seeping up from the darkness below, carrying with it a musty smell of damp earth and something else, something organic and unpleasant. Zara had specifically asked the owner about the basement when she booked the cabin. He'd told her it was just storage space, nothing for guests to worry about, and that it would remain locked during her stay. But here it was, open, as if someone had been using it recently. Someone who might still be down there. She approached the basement door with the knife raised, her heart hammering against her ribs. The wooden steps disappeared into absolute blackness. She fumbled for a light switch on the wall beside the door and found an old toggle switch. When she flipped it, a single bare bulb illuminated the top portion of the stairway, but the bottom remained shrouded in shadows. "Hello?" She called down, her voice echoing strangely in the confined space. "Is someone down there?" No response came, but she thought she heard a soft shuffling sound, like someone trying to move quietly across a concrete floor. The musty smell seemed stronger now, mixed with something that reminded her of unwashed clothes and human sweat. Someone had definitely been living down there. Zara slammed the basement door shut and turned the lock, then dragged a heavy wooden chair from the dining room and wedged it under the door handle. If someone was down there, they would have to make a lot of noise to get out, which would give her some warning. But the thought of a stranger lurking beneath her feet for the entire night made her stomach churn with anxiety. She retreated to the living room, keeping the knife close and positioning herself where she could see both the front door and the basement door. The fire was dying down, and she added another log, grateful for the warm light it provided. Outside, the wind at 2:17 a.m., according to the antique clock on the mantel, Zara heard the chair scraping against the basement door, not being moved aside, just a subtle grinding sound, as if someone was testing it, seeing how much pressure it could withstand before giving way. She sat bolt upright on the couch, gripping the knife handle so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The scraping stopped, followed by 3 slow, deliberate knocks from behind the basement door. Then silence. Zara's breathing became shallow and rapid. Whoever was down there knew she was awake, knew she could hear them. They were announcing their presence, playing some kind of psychological game with her. She considered her options. The front door was her only viable escape route, but she'd have to cross the main room to reach it, potentially exposing herself to whoever might be watching from outside. Her car keys were in her purse, which she'd left upstairs in the bedroom. Without them, even reaching the front door wouldn't guarantee her freedom. The knocking came again, this time in a pattern. 3 quick raps, followed by 2 slow ones, then 3 quick again. It reminded her of some kind of code, a signal. But a signal to whom? The possibility that there might be multiple intruders both inside and outside the cabin made her mouth go dry with terror. Zara forced herself to think rationally. She needed those car keys. Moving as quietly as possible, she crept toward the staircase, keeping the knife ready. Every step up the narrow stairs seemed to echo through the cabin, despite her efforts to be silent. Halfway up, she paused, listening for any sounds from below. The basement door rattled violently as if someone was throwing their full weight against it. The chair scraped and groaned but held firm. Then came a new sound that made Zara's blood freeze. A voice, muffled but clearly human, speaking in what sounded like a chant or incantation. The words were indistinct, but the tone was rhythmic and hypnotic, rising and falling like some ancient prayer. She reached the bedroom and grabbed her purse, fumbling through it until her fingers closed around the cold metal of her car keys. Through the bedroom window, she could see her Honda Civic sitting in the driveway, partially buried under fresh snow, but still accessible. Freedom was just a 30-second run through the storm. But as she turned to head back downstairs, Zara noticed something that hadn't been there before. On the bedroom wall, someone had written a message in what looked like charcoal or ash. "We've been waiting for you." The letters were uneven and hastily scrawled, as if written in darkness by someone feeling their way along the wall. Her legs nearly gave out. Someone had been in this room while she was downstairs. They'd walked past her, written this message, and somehow made it back to the basement without her noticing. Unless there was another way in and out of the cabin that she didn't know about. The chanting from below grew louder, and now she could hear multiple voices joining in, creating an eerie chorus that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. Zara didn't run down the stairs. She practically flew. The chanting had grown into a cacophony of voices, some high and shrill, others deep and guttural, all weaving together in a language she couldn't understand, but that filled her with primal dread. The basement door was shaking so violently now that the chair legs were starting to splinter against the wooden floor. She grabbed her coat from the hook near the front door and fumbled with the deadbolt, her hands trembling so badly she could barely turn the mechanism. Behind her, the chanting reached a crescendo, and she heard the basement door explode open, the chair clattering across the floor in pieces. The front door finally yielded, and Zara burst out into the howling snowstorm. The cold hit her like a physical blow, but adrenaline pushed her forward through the knee-deep snow toward her car. She could hear them behind her now, footsteps pounding up the basement stairs, spilling into the main room, then thundering across the front porch. Her car was covered in several inches of snow, and the door handle was frozen solid. She yanked at it desperately, keys cutting into her palm as she struggled to maintain her grip. Through the rear window, she could see dark figures emerging from the cabin, moving with purpose through the storm toward her. Come on," she whispered frantically, finally managing to wrench the door open. She dove inside and immediately hit the lock button, then jammed the key into the ignition. The engine turned over once, twice, then caught with a roar that seemed impossibly loud in the snow-muffled night. As she threw the car into reverse, Zara caught a glimpse of them in her headlights. At least 6 figures dressed in dark robes, their faces hidden by hoods. They moved with an unnatural coordination, spreading out to surround her vehicle. One of them raised something that glinted in the light, a long, curved blade that looked ancient and ceremonial. The car's wheels spun uselessly in the snow for a terrifying moment before finally finding traction. Zara backed out of the driveway so fast she nearly crashed into a tree. then spun the wheel hard and gunned the engine down the winding mountain road. In her rearview mirror, she could see the robed figures standing motionless in the swirling snow, watching her escape. The drive down the mountain was a nightmare of sliding tires and limited visibility. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely steer, and twice she nearly went over the edge of the narrow road. But finally, after what felt like hours, she saw the glow of streetlights ahead and the blessed sight of a 24-hour gas station. Zara pulled into the parking lot and sat in her car for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. The warmth of the heated seats gradually stopped her shaking, but her mind was still reeling. She pulled out her phone. Miraculously, she had full signal here and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? There were people in my rental cabin. They were chanting, and they had weapons. I think they were trying to hurt me. The dispatcher was professional, but seemed skeptical when Zara described the robed figures and the basement intrusion. She gave them the address of the mountain cabin and agreed to wait at the gas station for an officer to meet her. Officer Martinez arrived 40 minutes later, a middle-aged man with kind eyes who listened patiently as Zara recounted her experience. She could tell he was trying to take her seriously, but she saw the skeptical glances when she mentioned the chanting and the robed figures. Miss Chen, I've radioed for backup to check out the cabin you described. Can you tell me exactly how many people you saw? At least 6, maybe more. They were all wearing dark robes with hoods, and there was definitely someone living in the basement. I heard them moving around down there. Officer Martinez nodded and made notes in his small notebook. Had you been drinking tonight, miss? Even a glass of wine can sometimes make shadows look like people, especially when you're stressed and alone. Zara felt her cheeks flush with frustration. I know what I saw. They wrote a message on my bedroom wall. They had weapons. She pulled out her phone and realized she hadn't taken any photos. In her panic to escape, documenting the evidence had been the last thing on her mind. 20 minutes later, Martinez's radio crackled to life. He stepped away from the car to take the call, speaking in low tones that Zara couldn't make out. When he returned, his expression was troubled. Miss Chen, my colleagues found the cabin empty. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of anyone having been in the basement recently. The bedroom wall you mentioned, there's no writing on it. Zara's mouth dropped open. That's impossible. I saw it clearly. Someone wrote, "We've been waiting for you," in charcoal or ash. The officers did a thorough search. They found the basement door locked, just as the property owner said it would be. The guest book you mentioned was there, but the last entry was from 6 months ago, all positive reviews. A chill ran down Zara's spine that had nothing to do with the cold mountain air. What about the chair I put against the door, the splintered wood from when they broke through? Martinez consulted his notes. No evidence of any furniture being moved or damaged. Miss, when was the last time you slept? You mentioned you've been under a lot of stress at work. Sometimes our minds can play tricks on us when we're exhausted. Zara stared at him in disbelief. Everything she'd experienced, the footsteps, the chanting, the terrifying escape through the snow, had it all been in her mind? But it had felt so real, so viscerally terrifying. She could still smell that musty basement odour, still hear the rhythmic voices rising in their incomprehensible chant. I know what happened to me, she said quietly, but even as she spoke the words, doubt began to creep in. 3 weeks later, Zara sat in Dr. Hoffman's office, staring at the diplomas on the wall, as she recounted the mountain cabin incident for what felt like the 100th time. The psychiatrist listened with the same patient expression she'd worn during their previous sessions. Occasionally, making notes on her yellow legal pad. The mind's ability to create vivid, seemingly real experiences during periods of extreme stress is well documented, Dr. Hoffman said gently. You'd been working 18-hour days for months, barely sleeping, living on coffee and takeout. Your brain was essentially running on empty. But it felt so real, Zara insisted. I can still remember every detail. The smell from the basement, the way the chanting voices harmonized, the weight of that knife in my hand. Stress-induced hallucinations often feel completely authentic to the person experiencing them. Your subconscious mind was trying to tell you something, that you needed to escape, to get away from the pressure you'd been under. Zara nodded, though part of her remained unconvinced. She'd taken a leave of absence from her design firm and had been attending therapy twice a week. The panic attacks had mostly stopped, and she was sleeping better with the help of medication. But sometimes, in the quiet moments before dawn, she still heard echoes of that rhythmic chanting. After the session, Zara drove to her favorite coffee shop to meet her friend Sarah. She'd been avoiding social situations since the incident, but Dr. Hoffman had encouraged her to reconnect with her support system. You look better, Sarah said, studying Zara's face as she sat down. Still pale, but better. Thanks, I think. Zara stirred her latte absently. Sarah, can I ask you something? Have you ever experienced something that felt completely real, but everyone told you it wasn't? Sarah considered this. You mean like déjà vu? Or are we talking about something more serious? More serious. Like, what if you saw and heard things that left no physical evidence, but felt more real than anything you'd ever experienced? Are we still talking about the cabin thing? Sarah leaned forward, lowering her voice. Zara, I've known you for 8 years. You're the most logical, level-headed person I know. If you say something happened, I believe you. For the first time in weeks, Zara felt a wave of relief. Everyone thinks I had some kind of breakdown. That evening, Sarah called Zara with information that changed everything.
I did some research on that cabin you stayed at. You're not going to believe what I found.
Zara was curled up on her couch, trying to focus on a book, but Sarah's urgent tone made her sit up straight. What kind of research?
I looked up the property records and did some digging into local news archives. That cabin, 3 families have disappeared from there over the past 15 years, just vanished without a trace. The local police always found the same thing. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play, just empty cabins and abandoned belongings.
Zara's hands began to tremble. What happened to them?
Nobody knows. The first family was the Hendersons in 2008, a couple with 2 young kids on vacation. Their car was still in the driveway, luggage unpacked, dinner half eaten on the table. It was like they just stepped outside and never came back.
And the others?
The Morrison family in 2015, and a group of college friends in 2019. Same story every time. The weird thing is, the rental company kept leasing the place out. Different management companies, but the cabin stayed in rotation.
Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in her apartment. Did any of the missing people leave behind any clues? Notes, messages, anything? That's the strangest part. In each case, investigators found guestbook entries that described exactly what you experienced. voices in the night, feelings of being watched, sounds from the basement. But when police searched the properties, they found no evidence to support these claims, just like what happened to me.
Exactly. Zara, I think you stumbled into something that's been going on for years. Maybe you were supposed to disappear too, but somehow you got away.
Zara closed her eyes, trying to process this information. But the police found nothing. No evidence, no signs of the people I saw. What if they're very good at cleaning up after themselves? What if they have inside connections who help cover their tracks? Think about it. Officer Martinez seemed awfully quick to dismiss your experience as hallucinations. The possibility hit Zara like a physical blow. Had Martinez been part of whatever was happening at that cabin? Had he deliberately downplayed her report to protect whoever was operating there? Sarah, I need to see those news articles. Can you send them to me? Already on it. I'm emailing everything now. But Sarah, promise me you won't do anything dangerous with this information. If there really is some kind of, I don't know, cult or criminal organization operating up there, they've managed to stay hidden for 15 years. They won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens to expose them. After Sarah hung up, Zara's laptop chimed with an incoming email. She opened the attached news articles and police reports, her heart sinking with each new detail. The descriptions from the missing families' guestbook entries were almost identical to her own experience. The footsteps around the cabin, the sounds from the basement, the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. 6 months later, Zara stood at the edge of the mountain road, staring up at the cabin that had changed her life forever. She wasn't alone this time. Sarah stood beside her, along with Marcus Webb, an investigative journalist who had been following the disappearances for years. In his backpack were hidden cameras, audio recording equipment, and a satellite phone that would work even in this remote location. "You sure about this?" Sarah asked, her breath visible in the cold air. "We could still turn back." "I need to know the truth," Zara replied. "Those families deserve answers, and I'm the only one who escaped to tell their story." The cabin looked exactly as she remembered it. Dark windows staring down at them like hollow eyes, wraparound porches casting deep shadows in the late afternoon light. But this time, Zara was prepared. She had spent months researching the property's history, tracing ownership back through shell companies and false identities. What they'd found was a network that stretched far beyond one isolated cabin. Marcus had discovered similar disappearances near other remote rental properties across 3 states, all owned by the same shadowy organization. Local law enforcement in each area had consistently failed to find evidence or pursue investigations, suggesting either incompetence or corruption on a massive scale. As they approached the cabin, Zara felt the familiar chill of dread, but she pushed forward. The lockbox was exactly where she remembered it, containing the same brass key. Inside, everything was pristine, as if the cabin had been cleaned and reset for the next unsuspecting guests. "The basement," Zara whispered, pointing toward the door she remembered so clearly. Marcus set up his equipment while Sarah kept watch at the windows. When they opened the basement door, the musty smell hit them immediately. But unlike Zara's first visit, this time they could see what lay beneath. Hidden behind false walls were dozens of personal belongings, suitcases, jewelry, children's toys, family photos. The basement was a trophy room for 15 years of disappearances, but they weren't alone down there. As Marcus's camera flash illuminated the far corner, they saw him, a gaunt man in tattered robes, his eyes reflecting the light like an animal caught in headlights. He smiled, revealing broken teeth, and spoke in a voice like rustling leaves. "Welcome back, Zara. We've been waiting for you to return." The basement door slammed shut above them with a finality that echoed through the darkness. But this time, Zara wasn't running. This time, she had come prepared to expose the truth, no matter the cost. In the darkness, more voices began to chant.